Good evening, Graham, and good evening, Anthony. Welcome. This is the latest edition, slightly frantic, of Two Big Egos in a Small Car.
You know why it's frantic, Charles?
Well, Graham, life's just too quick at the moment. Too much
It's
on.
summer. Come summer, suddenly the arts comes alive, and there's always too many things to do.
It's a time of madness, of which,
Mm.
well, okay. So first topic, Graham. Um, so I wrote a story and put it online several weeks ago now, following a decision taken by local theatre company, NE Theatre York, that rather than giving out press tickets anymore, press tickets would be donated to charity. And I
Does that
asked,
does that mean the charity's going to review them for them? So they're going to have like Yorkshire Cancer Research reviewing a play.
so good point. I asked for clarification from Steve Turl, who directs the company. If you bear in mind, this is a company that I've been reviewing for more than 3 decades. And
Yeah, yeah.
so 2 shows ago, Steve said, "Oh, we don't really need reviews of this one." But anyway, I sort of turned up at the theatre and begged for a last-minute seat and got one and reviewed it. And then this last time I reviewed The Sound of Music, could have been The Sound of Silence if I hadn't been very kindly provided with a ticket by
Mm.
a secret person who very kindly gave me a ticket because I wasn't allocated any.
So basically, the reviewer par excellence is now sneaking into shows to write reviews that the theatre doesn't want or the theatre company doesn't want.
So I now, I mean, yes, that's how it looks. Now, of course, it's been
Yeah.
fascinating to see this. So I then ran and got no reaction to the original story I ran, which was Steve Turl's formal explanation as to why he no longer wanted, and I quote, professional reviews, which is very kind of him to call my reviewing professional. Anyway, the initial piece I put up was one of the ones that when the website collapsed, disappeared. Anyway, I put it up again just ahead of the show opening because I think it's important for people to know why there'll be no review. I'm not so arrogant to
Yeah.
think that my
Can I
my
butt in
review.
very quickly? But
Yes.
so basically, he's saying, I don't want professional reviews, which is a bit like saying, I don't want the story fact checked. Just write any old rubbish you want.
So
Facts are relevant.
so to be fair to Steve, his point, and it's a discussion point, which is so what has actually happened. Interestingly, is that it's sort of kicked off a debate on Facebook about reviews and about whether actors feel they should be reviewed or not. It's drawn different kind of reactions, some of which understand what Steve's concern is that young performers, if they get a negative review, it could damage their confidence for going on stage, which I understand. But I'd like to point out that in 30 years of reviewing, I think I learnt my lesson when I wrote one stupid, flippant, not very
Well,
funny line
yeah,
about
Charles,
a performer, and which was
both you and me
unnecessary
in the
and
1990s
regretful.
were more vicious in reviewing,
Yeah,
or rather, were much more
waspish.
blatantly honest in reviewing. But those days are long gone. You don't write vicious reviews anymore, and I don't either.
No, I mean, I, I think the important thing is with the uh, companies that are not professional is to give fair and balanced reviews and still to make suggestions where things could be better. And I think that's the word that used to be used at the York Press were accentuate the positive. And I think actually that is a fair recommendation. And I think that I've written reviews that reflect that. I don't think Steve was actually saying that I had written pieces that were critical. It was the possibility that I could, and that he doesn't want to,
It was
because
basically a blanket policy based on the sort of thinking that leads to PC culture in the extreme.
I,
It's to show that the theatre cares so much about its performers that it wouldn't possibly risk in any way upsetting them at any point whatsoever. I would argue that that approach, if it was a blanket across the arts, would lead to a complete decline in quality. Because the only way that great old actors of the past, like Laurence Olivier, rose to the top was
mm,
because people recognized in public they were better and the other actors weren't as good as Laurence Olivier. And if they're that sensitive that they can't stand even a very mild criticism, what are they doing on stage? They shouldn't be on stage. You know, if you're that shy, get back in your cupboard, get back to the wardrobe, get back to your bedroom, and dream about being on stage.
Again, I mean, I think that's fair enough with professional performers. I do try to be more cautious and careful, if you like, with community productions. And over the years, I've reviewed more and more community productions in New York. I hadn't foreseen that that would be the way it went, but it is. It's that so there are so many companies now that are performing in New York, and it's a delicate balancing act. I get to know a lot of the performers very well. I get to know the directors very well, and there's a and I'm not bigging myself up here about how I write, but it does still take skill and concern in how one writes, and I think there's a sense of responsibility that goes with that. But this particular company, has said that it would prefer, therefore, not to have the reviews that I've written. Interestingly, some people seem to be saying that I'm misinterpreting it because people could still pay for a review ticket and still review the show. Um, I, as a reviewer, will never pay for any review ticket. Absolutely
Charles,
never.
I know what you
And
like. You've got your principles, but I think what would happen is if you didn't have those principles and you paid to get in and then kept on reviewing, I suspect you'd be banned from the venue or the company shows, is what would happen.
I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? If one paid for a ticket and then absolutely slaughtered something.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying that, I mean, I don't see it as a form of bribery that one is given a ticket to go to a show. It is a custom that has existed in the theatre ever since it started. Some venues have tried to start introducing that newspapers should pay to go and see rock concerts or whatever because every single promoter is out to make as much money as possible. But again, on principle, that's not right either. What has to be looked at, I always think, is the bigger picture by which one promotes these companies' works before they run. One does interviews, and I've done interviews over the years regularly with this particular company. So they're very happy to have all that publicity, and I understand why, and I'm very happy to provide it. So I don't understand why, actually, at the other end of the equation, which is to have a fair and balanced judgment of a piece, is still not something that is wanted and significant. It's interesting amongst the responses that have been sent are, well, you should pay for a ticket. Why does he think you should be allowed in free? Well, as I've said, I don't
Well,
think it should
it's because you're doing a
change.
job of work. If you
Yeah.
were going in to watch the show and never ever wrote about the show or the company, and never had in the past and never did in the future, it's just a freebie and a jolly, in which
Yeah.
case that person would have a point.
Yeah.
But you're performing a service and a role for the public.
Yeah. I think so. So anyway, it'll be very interesting to see how this develops further. Some of the responses have suggested that I've misrepresented I'm not misrepresenting even remotely what has been sent to me by Steve. It was a perfectly reasonable and well measured, well thought out response to him to my question, and one which said, we would prefer not to have professional reviews anymore.
See,
So
that's the bit that I don't like. I can understand saying, okay, Charles, you're gonna have to pay from now on. That wouldn't be the end of the world, although I know to you you think it's the end of the world.
I wouldn't do it.
To my mind, what's much more troubling is the simple statement, we don't want professional reviews. It's a bit like, you know, would you say to a filmmaker, like, would you want any reviews when your film comes out? Would you rather it came out with nobody writing about it? The
Mm.
filmmaker would say, no, no, write about it. Please review it. Why the hell would you not want a professional review? It's one of the most ludicrous things I've heard in my entire life.
Yeah, I'm rather thinking along those lines, Graham, and I just hope that other companies don't start taking the same philosophy. And it's just, for whatever reason, and I think it's honourable to want to give press tickets to charity. I think it's honourable, or at least to give some tickets to charity. I think the decision to make them press tickets to go to charity, I'm not quite sure what point's being made in that. I don't ever see the relationship between what I do and what theatre companies do as anything other than symbiosis. I think the very fact that I've written for so long, and probably other people would think, bloody hell, why on earth have you stayed in York all these years writing about a local theatre scene when you should have gone off to London and whatever? And I don't take that view. I love being where I am, and I love writing about where I am, and I think that's what
That
people
also implies that the only worthwhile
respect me
art and
for.
culture happens in London, which is obviously would mean that the rest of Britain is completely useless. So that's not only very rude to
Exactly.
Britain, but it's
I've
also
tried to
inaccurate.
highlight. I've tried to highlight that that's not the case.
Mm.
I've also, I mean, over the years, I have given more and more coverage here in York to the amateur theatre scene, and I'm not again bigging myself up in doing that. It's because I think it should be done as a thing of record. What goes on, what
Yeah,
people
but
put in.
Charles, what's happening is the world has changed. The thing of record no longer exists, but partly because of social media. In a digital world, everything is instant, everything's quick, and then it's gone. A place of record scarcely exists anymore. People live so quickly, and the churn of comments, thoughts, actions, events, emotions, passions is like 24/7. So the idea of having a place of record that scarcely even applies to how most people
Mm,
think nowadays
mm,
who live in the digital world. And
yeah.
obviously, what's happening is the ethos and manners of the digital world have started to seep into the real world, and the real world is becoming a mirror of the digital world.
I interviewed Richard Hawley today, and
Mm.
he's playing here in York this summer, July 5, in the second season of Future Sound open air concerts, also featuring Elbow and also featuring, I think it's Nile Rodgers, I think, from memory, and then finishing with a comedy night as well, a strong comedy bill featuring, amongst others, Maisie Adam from Panel Harrogate. And I mean, he was talking about. I mean, it was a he's a man who's both full of humor and serious grit in what he says.
Mm.
We were talking about what are the themes of his songs, and he said he was actually surprised by someone pointing out to him that he writes in a way that no other writer does about men's grief, and he
Mm.
said it surprised even him.
Pugnacious
Trying to
and
point
in
out that he's
battle
writing.
mode,
Mm,
looking to get someone.
yeah.
Rock and roll and art falls apart.
Sorry to interrupt. Um, I lost contact with you then.
Can you still hear me, Graham?
I can hear you, but Anthony's gone off.
Yeah,
I can
I
hear
think
you
it's
now.
right. Just
Which bit? Yeah,
let's just go back to the point because it
Richard
jumped at
Hawley.
yeah, it jumped at the one I was asking for you to comment on what he was thinking about. You know, right? He writes songs about men's grief.
I was going to mention Roy Orbison.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, Richard Hawley is like a more recent version of Roy Orbison that Roy was about men's anguish in a romantic fashion, but not in an anti-woman fashion. Roy was a bit of a softie, really. And so
Mm,
is Richard. You know, he
mm,
talks about, romance that fails and love in life, but he doesn't have a go at women. He's a gentle soother of problems.
mm.
And in that way, he's different to Roy Orbison, who's very operatic and very, anguished.
Because I suggested to him that you know he was a romantic at heart, and then this is
Mm.
when he countered at this point about writing about writing about men's grief, and so I think that point's valid actually. Because he didn't want to use the word nostalgic about his music, but he acknowledged that it played up to certain things of the past that he liked and he admired and were strains
Yeah,
in
the interesting
his
thing,
writing.
Charles, is that when I bought Low Edges, which came out, his second album about 2003,
Mm,
which I liked a lot, it did remind me of the late 50s and early 60s in Robertson. And
mm,
that tied in with his quiff, because when he got a quiff, this is pre Alex Turner. This is
yes.
pre the 1950s being of interest to the music world. But the interesting thing was that when he got a quiff and occasionally a sort of leather jacket, he wasn't trying to be a rockabilly guy or a 1950s guy. He just liked wearing a quiff. So he's not trying to recreate the past. He just happens to like having a quiff and happens to like a bit of rockabilly, and that's why he's good because he's not a nostalgist, but he's influenced not by recent eras, but by the 1950s.
He made. We talked as well about not necessarily Yorkshire versus Lancashire or Yorkshire versus London. But he made the point that Sheffield, in some ways, had been ignored, and actually quite liked that position. He made that comparison. He said it's part of that Yorkshire thing of just not really wanting to draw attention to yourself. And he said, and partly with Sheffield, it's because it's this city of 7 hills, and it's kind of hidden away, if you like, within that structure. So, and it's not looking to play to the outside world. It's playing to itself as a place. And it was that thing where you couldn't sort of walk down the street and try to stand out in some way because people would comment on it. So that's not the kind of nature of Sheffield. But he said at the same time,
it's like a village, not a city.
Yeah. But he said it was ripe though for creativity. He said everything you could want for creativity is in Sheffield. He said every colour under the rainbow is at his fingertips, which I thought was a beautiful image. He said that's what makes. He said everything is there in Sheffield for creativity. It's perfect for writers. It's perfect for musicians, and that's why it will always be that Sheffield is the place that he feels most connected with.
There's always something of the nighttime about Richard Hawley's music. It always sounds like it's like late in the evening, or the sun's gone down just before it gets totally dark. And when he plays Museum Gardens in York, he's going to be on when it's getting dark.
Yes,
so his music, his sort of dreamy, slightly ethereal, romantic music is going to fit the actual sky and the mood of the evening as he plays.
Yeah. I asked him also about water and the influence of water in his music, and I said it's ironic because Sheffield is obviously it's kind of landlocked. It's not, but you write quite often about rivers and the power of water. And he said, well, the great thing about water is that we all notice the surface, the glistening surface, but underneath that is then the eddies, so it starts getting troubling, and underneath that is the darkness of what's really down there in the waters, and it could be shopping trolleys, it could be any number of things that have been thrown in. It could even be something rather murkier involving dead bodies or whatever. And he says he's as drawn to the surface as he is drawn to below to reflect in his songs as well. So for all the fact that he's written about both
like Jarvis
sunrise.
Cocker. He's like Jarvis Cocker from Sheffield because Jarvis with Pulp will deal with the subjects that are dark, but the end result very rarely feels threatening. So Richard Hawley can deal with darkness, but it doesn't end up sounding like The Cure.
No,
he's got that softness and
he will write about he'll write about sunset and he'll write about sunrise as well, and maybe the sunrise song is more important than the sunset song in him. But he's done both ends. He's done both ends of the candle with that. Have you seen him live? I was trying to remember if you've ever seen him live.
Only with Pulp, because he plays with Pulp quite a lot.
Pulp, yeah.
I think he's on the new Pulp album more.
He is. He's on the new Pulp album.
But he's not on the tour. I don't think he's on the tour.
No, he's co-written with Jarvis for the new album. So Graham, that was just that was a sort of tangential thought really, but it was just because of it was a fascinating interview with Richard Hawley today.
Sounds good.
One that it almost didn't happen because I'd mentioned when the gigs were first announced, and I was having a conversation with someone. I won't say who it was, but they were kind of involved in helping to set interviews up, etc. And this thing came to me saying, we're very happy for the York Press to do the interview, but it would be great if it could actually be someone else than you, Charles, because I gather that last time you and Richard Hawley did an interview together, he left it halfway through, which is not true. So I had to,
really?
What had happened with Richard and
You're unbelievable, Charles, because you seem to attract trouble. You wouldn't have thought by looking at you that this is the case, but you seem to have a natural knack of it, and it's always unfair. You've never done anything wrong.
I he definitely did not leave the interview or put the phone down halfway through.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
it was, we had slightly different humor, and it's one of those interviews where we just kind of were slightly on different paths. But it was kind of humorous because he was even taking Richard was even taking the mick out of me on this one, but certainly it wasn't the case of him, leaving the interview halfway through. So I had to then ring the organisers of the interview to say, look, please understand that nothing untoward happened with Richard. We just were on slightly different
Grief.
paths with our humour. Just sometimes
Unbelievable.
these things happen. So luckily, and thank you to the organisers of the interview, they'd said, okay, that's fine. We understand your explanation, no problem, and the interview can still go ahead. So it wasn't one of those unfortunate Graham Chalmers occasions that we have charted quite often on this podcast,
Yeah, but
where we
I
put our
always seem
foot
to
in
get
it
away with it.
without
I
meaning
never
to.
have to explain myself. So,
I certainly,
unlike you, Charles.
I certainly did on that one. So, Graham, have you been back to Bradford for any more City of Culture in
No, I
recent?
haven't. But changing the subject entirely, the
Yeah.
good news is that Edinburgh Film House is going to reopen this month.
So it'll be open in time for the festival.
Ye I'm not
Mm.
entirely sure about that. I mean, it is the case that the film festival tends these days to release its information about which films are showing where and
Yes,
when quite late on before
it
the
does. It does.
festival in August. But so
Yeah.
far, there's absolutely no sign whatsoever that there'll be screenings in the film house. Now, on the one hand, since the film house is the film festival's traditional home, you would have
Yeah.
thought, oh, they'll definitely do it there. On the other hand, when they were arranging this year's film festival, they've been booking films for the last 6 to 9 months.
Mm.
They can hardly book films without actually booking a venue. They,
No.
they couldn't they couldn't book films and hope the film house would be ready. So there is a definite chance that even though the film house will be open in time, it may still not show that many film festival films, but I'm only guessing. I don't
But
actually know.
at least it is the good news as we've kept an eye on it. That it is reopening, and that is wonderful that the government of Scotland and the arts world in Scotland has come together to make sure that one of the gems of the film landscape in this country is going to return. So, Graham,
Well,
what
yeah, and
have
hmm,
go on?
there's a
Go
couple
on.
of interesting films coming up that I do know
Yeah.
about in the film festival in Edinburgh
Mm-hmm.
this August. First of all, the closing gala is a documentary about Irving Welsh, the author of
Mm.
Trainspotting fame. But
Yeah.
from what I've read, the film concerns him taking hallucinogenics.
Ah.
So goodness knows. Well, that's what I like. And then the opening night in the Midnight Madness Strand, where they show loosely horror type films
Oh yes.
at about midnight in the Cameo.
Yeah.
The opening Midnight Madness film this time is by Ben Wheatley, who's a brilliant British director. It's
Yeah. I'm
called Bulb,
very much a fan
and
of
that
his.
sounds
Mm.
quite weird as well. And
Mm.
I'm a fan of Ben Wheatley's weird films like The Kill List
Mm.
and what's it? A Field in England and
Oh yes. Yes.
Sightseers,
Yeah.
High Rise, great films.
Mm. And yet not sort of regularly watched. I think loved by um, cinephiles, shall we say?
Well, yeah, he hasn't made a single film that I can find that's made a profit. I could be wrong, but even when he was getting glowing reviews about 10, 15 years ago, he's always struggled for a mass audience. And I think that probably says more about the state of cinema and the mass audience than it does about Ben Wheatley, because he is a brilliant director.
Compare and contrast Guy Ritchie.
Now, that is a contrast.
Yeah, but
Although saying that,
he's
Wembley
everywhere at
did,
the moment.
yeah,
He is everywhere at the moment, even documentaries.
yeah, yeah. He's a man. What he does is he gives polish to terrible ideas. He comes up with a terrible idea, and you think that's going to be a terrible film. Then when you go to see it, you think, well, that was enjoyable. So
Yeah.
he's got a knack of turning, you know, lumps of mud into not quite diamonds, but something palatable.
I think he gets the British character.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Yeah.
And I think, we're a nation that laughs at itself, mainly because it needs to laugh at itself, but we do. And I do think that's one of his great assets. I would still love Guy Ritchie to direct a James Bond film. I would still like to see what he would do with it.
Yeah, that could be really good. I agree because one thing that James Bond films are, despite their sexism, more so in the past than in recent James Bond movies, is they're never vulgar.
Mm.
And I'd like to see a full-blooded, full-throated, slightly vulgar James Bond because I think it'd be really entertaining.
I think there's potential for that. So, right. So you could have Right, you could. Danny Boyle hasn't done one either, has he? Ever, the James Bond?
Yeah, I'm not sure that would play out. He was supposed to do one, I think, but
Was he?
I don't think they gave him enough freedom to do what he wanted to do.
What about who was that director we saw last year in Edinburgh?
Gaspar Noé, the Argentinian stroke
Yeah,
Frenchman, who makes very extreme films and is quite a scary, slightly extreme character himself.
it was quite scary even to say hello to.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't have sort of like tried to chat to him. That was a
No,
mistake. I
fatal
mean,
mistake at a film festival where that is normally the custom. But never mind.
I was just being a bit of a fan, but it looked like he was going to kill me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the Beach writer,
Oh, yeah, Alex Garland, yeah,
hmm. Could he do a Bond?
he looks. He, I
I mean,
think
it's
he could do a
prolific.
Bond, but he doesn't have it. His films aren't very emotional. I've seen a lot of Alex
Mm,
Garland films, and
mm.
they're well constructed, well directed, and they're very good at the physical feeling of being in a location. So he's good with action scenes, but they always, for my mind, Alex Garland films lack emotion, and a James Bond film without emotion or passion, I don't think is going to work.
No. Now, talking of sort of British culture, Doctor Who, change of Doctor Who after only 18 months. Is this the death knell for Doctor Who? Is this a sign of it might just have to have a little break?
If Billy Piper does become permanently the new Doctor Who, that
Mm,
might revive it. And it's not that the thing is failing spectacularly now, it's just it's in decline. It reached a peak with David Tennant, went
yes.
down a little bit with Matt Smith,
Mm.
probably went down a bit further with Peter Capaldi, then it down with Jodie Whittaker, I think it was. Was it Jodie Whittaker?
Jodie Whittaker,
I could be
yes,
getting that
Yorkshire
wrong.
girl, yeah.
And that went down further with her. So it's like if this one doesn't work, I think it may end up being in hiatus like it was before, with the
Mm.
occasional special, and that'll be it. Because there's no point in spending a lot of money making whole series if the audience just isn't big enough. And I think what they've done is they've tinkered too much with the formula they had, because at the end of the day, long running series are a formula,
Yeah.
and they've kept on messing with the formula just to keep it fresh and just to like become progressively more modern and also more multicultural and more with modern times. And
Mm.
it's undermined the formula as far as I can see.
So does it actually now become a question of Doctor Who? Who is who? Who is he?
I'd say more like Doctor What Point,
What
Doctor
Doctor what?
Why. What
Doctor
is the
Why?
point of
Doctor
Doctor Who
Why?
now? When
Yeah.
when, when I occasionally watch an episode, and
Mm.
this has been the case for a few series now, maybe three or four, I just
Mm.
think, okay, I can see the talent involved here and the skill, but what's the point of it? Whereas before, you always knew what the point it was, and now I don't see what it's just too clever for its own good. It's like an enigma wrapped inside a riddle inside a,
Sausage
whatever.
roll. Mm.
Yeah, inside a sausage roll, and it
Well,
can't see because it's in the
inside a
dark.
TARDIS, Graham. Inside a TARDIS, probably.
Inside TARDIS, yeah. So
Mm.
I hope it is Billy Piper. She might be able to resurrect it.
Because she appeared in the last episode, didn't she? The
Yeah, it
transition.
doesn't mean that she's going to be signing up for a few series,
That
but
might just have been a teaser.
yeah, yeah. But it needs someone likable. It needs someone who you recognize,
Mm,
who the audience is like as a person from their past
mm,
acting history. It doesn't need someone new that they haven't seen before that they have to get to know and get to like. It
mm.
now needs someone guaranteed, a bit like when they brought in Christopher Eccleston
Yes.
when it was resurrected about 20 years ago. It's like, it was always going to work with Christopher Eccleston.
Even though
It
he
was
did
always
I
going to work
think
with
he
David
did.
Tennant.
I think Christopher had the shortest run of anyone in the role. I think.
Yeah, but he's an actor, darling. He's not going to like sign up for 10 years of Doctor Who.
No, I think that seems to be the case with the Scottish actor who's done it for the last 18 months, whose name you might need to give me, from Sex Education. I'm trying to remember his name. Can you remember his name? Your fellow
Well, the
Scotsman?
Doctor Who,
Hmm.
the last Doctor Who's just retired,
What was
I
his
have
name?
no earthly idea what his name is.
Is that troubling? I might have to look him up.
It is a bit troubling, but only because I didn't watch much of the last two series that he was in. If I watched more of
Hmm.
the episodes, I would remember his name.
Yeah, it's maybe these things have their moments, and then they come back, have their moment, and there's a kind of rise and fall that makes sense. And maybe it comes just too desperate trying to keep it going.
Well, what happened last time around when they had a break was that having a break gave audiences and program makers the chance to relax, forget about it, and let the world carry on. So when it came
Yes.
back, it was fresh. It's a bit like when a band takes 5 years out, then records an album like 7 years later. You know, sometimes that breather does them good.
Yeah. So the actor's name is Nakuti Gatwa, a Rwandan
Mm,
Scottish actor. He was
yeah.
the 15th Doctor, and it was 18 months, which I think was the second shortest run. And actually, in this sort of announcement, I didn't see what his explanation was for wanting to go so quickly.
I know I think he's a successful stage actor as well. I'm pretty sure he had a theatre run coming up. So
Yeah,
I think he had to decide, am I going to do a theatre run or am I going to sign up for more Doctor Who's?
he
And I
was
think
given.
if the recent series had been a slam dunk gigantic hit, he
Yeah,
probably would have thought about not doing the theatre run. But since they were only doing okay, maybe he thought, well, at the end
yeah.
of the day, my long term career is not going to be in Doctor Who, so I might as well get on with like not being Doctor Who.
To quote the Edinburgh Live, it says his reasons that he gave: physical and mental demands it requires, especially for the lead character, is the reason that he's quitting.
Sounds like a bit. I don't know. Maybe it's true.
I mean, acting is demanding. That interestingly, that just going back to
Yeah,
Richard Hawley.
yeah. Try saying that to Robert De Niro
Yeah, well, Richard
you know,
Hawley was saying, standing. What's
or
it called?
Martin Sheen in
What's
Apocalypse
this
Now.
musical called? Standing at the Sky's Edge, and he was
Yeah,
saying that
yeah.
he would think musicians worked hard at what they did, and he's always believed in hard work. He said that's he never ever was ambitious. It was really interesting in the interview. He was saying things I'd never heard him say before. He was not
Hmm.
ambitious. He was believed in hard work, which came from his father as much as anything, and also because it came from the fact that when I think his father did football coaching as well. I think it was, and used to say that hard work is the best way to get things done. But he was saying that he thought that musicians worked hard. Then he watched how the actors were working on
Hmm.
Standing at the Sky's Edge, and he said that was an absolute revelation to him, to the pressure that they put themselves under as performers. And he says it's beyond even musicians doing what they're doing, and it surprised him. It was a real revelation to him. So
Well, as you know, an actor can't busk it. You have to be either a phenomenally experienced, brilliant actor, or you have to have a very small role
mm,
for you to anyway busk it. If you busk it as an actor, it shows and it's not good. But you can be the rhythm guitarist in a band
mm,
and not be in the mood to deliver the whole goods.
yeah,
Just go through the motions.
yeah,
And quite frankly, that's usually good enough.
absolutely, absolutely, it is. So yeah, so I mean, that goes right back to our opening discussion point, actually. Uh, appreciation of reviews, whether they matter or not, but also the feelings of actors, which I understand why these things have to
The
be
other,
taken
the
into
other great thing
consideration.
about that, or rather terrible thing about that, is that are they saying that they don't want your reviews or anybody's reviews, but they do want your interviews and your previews? Or are they saying we just don't want anything?
So they haven't actually sort of referred to that. I did
Mm,
request an interview, but the company concerned they wanted a bit of a time off before sort of working on this latest show that they're doing.
mm.
I think I am more than happy to keep publicizing shows in advance. I, I don't. I mean, this weird thing is, just going back to the point about, do they still want reviews? I mean, it's that to me is not, maybe then if they're not professional reviews, maybe he's a particular company, which seems to me
Well, as you know, when the reviewer is any good, because it's for most companies and most films and most footballers and most writers, what they want to hear in a review is you're fantastic and this is great. But of course, there's no point in doing that over and over again. So, in an ideal world, I'm sure every company in the world would say all we want is good reviews, or we don't want reviews at all. So, in this competitive Britain we've got now, where it's dog eat dog and everybody's on edge and everybody's looking over their shoulder and everybody's worried it's not going to pan out and everybody's worried about the
Mm,
future, Yeah, maybe they just can't handle even the possibility of anything vaguely negative because they're already on edge.
I'm sure there are still others who want their work to be analysed and reflected upon. And acting is there are many different reasons for why people want to act, and for some it's to actually to express themselves in a way that they could not possibly do if they weren't actually wearing the costume of performance. And I absolutely understand that. And some people find interviews difficult. They're much happy to be playing a role on stage. I fully understand when actors and directors don't want to read reviews until the show's over. I get that completely and utterly. But maybe I mean, I like to read match reports, for example, and to me, match reports are just the same as reviews. I love reading match reports of cricket, football. Some of the great writing in this country is sports reporting, and I don't think suddenly you're going to not have matches being reported. So I can't,
I suppose it goes back,
and I don't see any. I do not see any difference.
Yeah, but it goes back to that old human characteristic. You want to read about bad news as long as it's not about yourself. You're quite happy to read other stuff about other people being in trouble or something going wrong, but you don't want you to be in that story as someone who has done something wrong or has ended up in a bad situation. That's just a human characteristic. And I suppose with the digital world, it gives the arts a chance to not need to rely totally on reviews because they can get their information out there themselves.
Sure. And there is a skill to doing that. I absolutely understand that. I don't think it negates the significance of criticism, the art of criticism, even academic criticism, which is still very, very important. I understand we're now in a world of influencers who write short sentences and based in hyperbole. And I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, but influencers write short sentences to plug things that they're going to get money from. So that's not a review. That's basically their career in marketing other people's products.
Which is clearly not
is not the same thing as a review, a proper review.
No. I mean, some people argue that the standards of journalism, go down, or journalism as it becomes. I still think that you can still find extremely good reviewing in national newspapers. There's less of it than there used to be, less space is given to it. But I still think that the Sunday supplements and the Saturday supplements are full of really, really well-written reviews. And book reviewing in this country, for example, is still of an incredibly high standard. And our Sunday newspapers, those sections are some of the best written pieces within newspapers. And long may that continue. And I'm quite sure, again, that book writers would not wish their work not to be reviewed and analysed. I mean, it helps, for example, for some writers to be discovered, and it's the same with new plays and new musicians.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.